afternoon agenda on GB News, Monday to Thursday from 4 p.m. till 6 p.m. We don't lecture to you or try to tell you what to think. We do a deep delve into a topic with views from across the range of debate, therefore leaving you, the viewer, to make up your own mind. Join me, Alex Phillips, for the afternoon agenda on GB News, 4 till 6, Monday to Thursday. You're watching GB News live across the UK and the world on our digital stream.
GB News is Britain's news channel.
We are the UK's home of discussion and debate from all perspectives.
We are here for you. Don't forget to join our YouTube community by clicking on that subscribe button.
And if you want the GB News app, you can click and catch up on programmes anytime.
We love to hear from you, so email us.
gbviews@gbnews.uk.
Thanks for being part of the GB News family.
My name is Andrew Doyle. Join me every Sunday evening at 7 p.m. for Free Speech Nation. This is a show where we address current affairs and news stories of the week with the help of two wonderful comedian panellists. I brought in comics because I want to give it a lighter edge, and also they work for less. See you there.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday, and there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch. And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
I'm Colin Brazier. I've reported from more than 70 countries around the world, covered wars from Afghanistan to Iraq, from Lebanon to the Balkans. I'm trying to bring that experience, that feel for events, to the studio. And something else, I'm ready to give an opinion. Today's stories with a spark. Brazier from 8 p.m. weekdays on GB News.
Good afternoon. It's time to debate the big issues of the day with me, Gloria Piero, Liam Halligan, and a whole host of experts.
Today we're asking, does the UK need to do more to support its veterans? That's after millions of people across Britain held a 2-minute silence to remember those who lost their lives in 2 world wars and later conflicts.
But first, it's the news.
I'm Rosie Wright. Let's get you up to date at 2 o'clock. The Duchess of Cornwall joined millions of people in observing 2-minute silence today to remember the men and women who've lost their lives in conflict. On the 11th hour of the 11th day on the 11th month, people across the UK paused to honour those who made the ultimate sacrifice. Camilla joined hundreds of veterans at Westminster Abbey. Armistice Day commemorates the end of the First World War. Services will also be held on Remembrance Sunday. Border Force officials have now intercepted at least 20 migrant boats attempting to cross the Channel today, each carrying up to 50 people. It's been reported that 4 small boats have also made it to shore, landing on Deal beaches in Kent. There's been an influx of migrants trying to reach the UK in recent days, with 1,200 crossing the English Channel in the past 48 hours. Thousands of care home staff in England are facing job losses now that COVID vaccines have become mandatory for them. From today, staff must be double jabbed to work unless they're medically exempt. The move comes as the sector faces severe shortages, with some quitting in advance of the new policy. NHS waiting lists in England are at a record high as health leaders warn the system is buckling under pressure. The chief executive of the NHS Confederation says the current situation is unsustainable and that patient care is being compromised. Data from NHS England shows 5.8 million people were on waiting lists at the end of September. That's the highest number since records began. 11 UK retailers are recalling batches of cold and flu capsules because of a mistake on the packaging. Perrigo tablets sold by outlets like Boots, Tesco's and Morrison's overstated the safe maximum daily dose for children. The medicines regulator, which issued the recall, says the risk to consumers is low. A funeral's been held for Northern Ireland veteran Dennis Hutchings in Plymouth. Hundreds of mourners lined a road applauding, cheering and saluting as the coffin arrived at the church, escorted by bikers. The 80-year-old died from COVID last month. He was awaiting trial over a shooting in County Tyrone during the Troubles in 1974. Rotherham Council is stepping up efforts to combat child sexual exploitation. A new plan has been passed which addresses problems in the borough. It follows criticism from opposition Conservatives who said not enough was being done to tackle child grooming, that the council and South Yorkshire Police dispute. The 2014 J report revealed that 1,500 children had been abused in the town between 1997 and 2013. One survivor that we're calling Elizabeth was among them. She told us her views on the council's new plan.
Hoping that there's improvements, and there will be, but because they've been amended, I feel like they've been watered down a little bit more. I hope that Rotherham can make a stand, and I hope Rotherham can heal. Am I 100% sure that's going to happen? No.
The former president of South Africa, Frederick Willem de Klerk, has died at the age of 85. The politician oversaw the end of the apartheid era and shared the Nobel Peace Prize with Nelson Mandela. He's said to have died peacefully at his home in Cape Town. Water bills in England and Wales could be slashed by more than £67 million next year, according to Ofwat. Companies like Thames Water failed to meet targets set by the regulator, which encourages them to invest in customer service. The payments will be deducted from bills in the next financial year and will save customers around £3.50 each across the year. Steven Gerrard says Aston Villa's ambitious plans were a factor in him agreeing to become the club's new head coach. The former Liverpool and England captain has left Rangers, who he guided to the Scottish Premiership title undefeated last season. Gerrard replaces Dean Smith, who was sacked by Villa on Sunday. A new species of dinosaur with an unusually large nose has been identified by a retired GP on the Isle of Wight. Jeremy Lockwood spent years rummaging through old bones, and when he reconstructed a skull which had been in storage since 1978, he discovered the unique bulbous nasal bone. The PhD student said the discovery made it one of the happiest days of lockdown. You are right up to date. I'll bring you the latest headlines in half an hour. Now back to Liam and Gloria.
Coming up today on Piero and Halligan.
We're asking, does the UK need to do more to support its veterans? We're marking Remembrance Day, when millions of people across Britain observed a 2-minute silence in honour of those who lost their lives in 2 world wars and subsequent conflicts.
And it's not just our guests we want to hear from. Join the debate with your view. Do we do enough for those who have served our country? Do we treat them with the dignity and respect they deserve? Email gbviews at gbnews.uk or tweet us at gbnews.
And welcome to the programme. The UK has come together for Remembrance Day.
Millions of people across Britain have observed a 2-minute silence to commemorate the contribution of British and Commonwealth military and civilian servicemen and women in the 2 world wars and later conflicts, held exactly 103 years after the armistice, which ended World War I in 1918.
Our GB News Northwest reporter Bradley Harris has spoken to Colin Hughes, a former soldier, at a memorial event in Stockport about what Remembrance Sunday means to him.
While we were on active service, I lost quite a few comrades. I was thinking of the time when we were in Northern Ireland. I served there for 3 occasions, and it was the shock on hearing that, you know, a comrade had actually died in service in an area where I'd been just a few days before. We were on an exercise in Germany in a forest. Now their forests are miles away from, you know, civilization, so it's really black. There's no light pollution at all. And we dug 6-foot trenches because this is in the middle of the night and I couldn't see a hand in front of my face. And I went right down the trench and I tore a cartilage. I wasn't aware of the damage at the time, and they couldn't find anything wrong with me. It was years later when the pain came back, and they realised that the cartilage was torn. But since then, I've had 6 major operations on my knee. I'm obviously on a pension now from the Ministry of Defence, and I must praise the surgeon at the Robert Jones Agnes Hunt Hospital. The surgeon there is a Royal Army Medical Corps officer, and I can't praise him enough for the treatment that I actually got in the hospital. I left after 9 years, and after a short period I found that I was missing the comradeship, and I was missing the army itself, and I did try to re-enlist, but at that time the knee was playing up and I couldn't get back in they wouldn't let me back in the army. But I've met people who have done 22 years, 25 years, and it's really, really difficult for them to adjust into civilian life. Army life, military life is completely different to anything that we experience as a civilian. There's quite a lot of support now. There's the Royal British Legion, there's SAFA, there's quite a lot of support, because we've got a lot of lads now suffering from post-traumatic stress disorder, and the specialist organisations looking after them as well. So it's very. I mean, these organisations are very, very important to veterans. There's people who are physically injured, and there are those who are now mentally injured, and it's those people that we really ought to be looking after at the moment.
A most distinguished and beautifully dressed former soldier there, Colin Hughes, speaking to GB News Northwest reporter Bradley Harris in Stockport.
We're honoured now to be joined by Major General Clive Chapman, who's the former head of counter-terrorism at the MOD and senior British military advisor at the US Command. A decorated soldier who served in the Parachute Regiment and fought in the Falklands campaign, including the Battle of Goose Green.
Here he is in the Falklands in 1982 on Sussex Mountain after being under air attack for 3 days.
Thank you so much for joining us. Let's start by asking you what today means to you.
Well, it means 4 things to me. The first one is obviously to remember those that I fought with who didn't come back. And actually those members of my family, my great uncle Albert Stone, who was killed in the First World War, and my grandmother, who was a civilian, who was killed along with 75 other people in a German bombing raid during the Plymouth Blitz. So obviously the first thing is to remember. The second one is we remember to remind, and that is to ourselves, the politicians, and the youth who want to change the world for the better in the future, that the object of war should be a better peace and that we should not go to war lightly. Thirdly, it's really for me to show respect for the families and for their sacrifice, because it's not only soldiers who lose their lives, it's the loved ones who also are affected by this. And lastly, to reflect on those who might be broken by war and to be thankful for my own good fortune, because when you face the enemy, you fight not for queen and country, but for life itself, for the chance with your mates to see the dawn of a new day and to be a survivor. And I'm grateful that I got the chance to see that dawn when others did not.
Major General Chapman, what do we need to do to support more our veterans, some of whom do find after the turmoil of war, the transition back into civilian life pretty difficult? Of course, we have the excellent British Legion, and their role is very much to the fore today as people dig into their pockets and give to charities and so on. But more can we do as a government and as broader society to help those veterans?
Well, firstly, you have to look at what is the spectrum of being a veteran, because a veteran, certainly from SAFA, is defined as someone who's done 1 day of service. So there's a different gap analysis of someone who's done 1 day of service to someone who's been in major combat operations and been wounded or killed. And it's understanding the different needs, particularly those at the higher end of that spectrum, the families of those who've been killed and those who've been psychologically or physically wounded or scarred, that need to be looked after. Now, there are challenges for all armed forces personnel when they leave their parent service for a very simple reason, and that is when in their time in the service, they've had both vertical cohesion between leader and led, and more importantly, horizontal cohesion between each other, the matehood, which is what really they fight for. And that's the first thing that they miss, and was you saw in your report prior to me coming on, in terms of that love and belonging, really, that people need. They have an intimacy in the armed forces, which needs to be replaced when they go outside. You can do that through social organisations. And actually, I would argue it's easier to do that now in the age of social media, because the ability to swarm together and meet up at a time and place of their choosing is a lot easier than it was, say, 20 or 30 years ago. Then you go on to the aspects of access to wider healthcare, access to housing, mental health, and those issues. And really, we need to ask ourselves here, is there a difference between other public bodies and private bodies? So, for example, do the police also have access to those sort of same things? Because you could argue that a lot of people see more trauma on road traffic accidents in the police than a lot of military. Because one thing about being in the military is we are not fighting every single day of a military career. And indeed, combat operations in Afghanistan, for example, ended in December 14. And 2 weeks ago was the first contact, that is, people firing at an enemy, in nearly 7 years in Mali, which didn't get much press attention. So there's 7 years when people have not been firing bullets. So there is this big spectrum between people and what needs they need in the future when they come out of the armed forces.
Fighting for your country, in my view, I'm sure in many people's views, is the most noble thing that you can do. Do you think while people are serving, they have the tools, the resources, the support to be recognised for that very, very noble cause?
Well, here we come on to the civilian-military gap, and there are a number of these gaps which we often allude to. The first thing is the demographic gap. There are less women in the army and the armed forces than there probably should be. The second thing that we're suffering from at the moment is really a familiarity gap. All the Second World War veterans are dying off, and there are less veterans who are visible and less of the armed forces who are visible in society, and there are less family connections between that. So there's that gap there. The next one is, of course, there's a cultural gap between us. We have a distinct language, we have a distinct uniform, we have distinct processes which are different than civilians. Next, we have what we often think is a values gap, where those in the armed forces have good character and those outside are somehow different. That's the thing between people in the armed forces being heroes and those outside, for example, being deemed to be, I don't know, softies or snowflakes or all that kind of stuff. And that leads finally to this sort of sacrifice gap. We are a volunteer armed forces, and the dead of a volunteer armed force, when they do die, can lead them to suffering from frustration and actually a sense of entitlement and some need for deference. Now, if you look at all the surveys, I would say that the armed forces are highly regarded in this country, and we actually grieve really amongst ourselves, and you see it in the newspapers, because it's news when people mess up in the army and do things that we wouldn't wish them to do.
Major General Chapman, we're grateful to you for your service, and thanks a lot for your time today appearing on GB News.
Let's cross now to Colonel Richard Kemp, a retired British Army officer who served as an infantry battalion commanding officer. Among his assignments was to serve in Afghanistan. And he joined us now from Florida. Colonel Richard Kemp, thank you for joining us. Most people would regard what you do as heroic, any man or woman who serves our country. Do we treat you like heroes?
Well, I've had the honour of serving alongside many heroes. I'm not myself a hero, but I've served alongside many soldiers who I would consider heroes, who have either given their life and given everything they've ever had and everything they're very likely to have by giving their life, or have suffered severe maiming, or otherwise have put their lives at great risk to save others or to achieve a mission. So yes, there are plenty of heroes in the armed forces, and there have been over history. And on Remembrance Sunday, I above all, I remember those soldiers I know who served and fought and died during my service, who I knew personally. But also I remember two of my family members who gave their lives in war. The first one was my great uncle, who was killed at Passchendaele and the second one was his nephew, who was killed fighting in the Battle of the Atlantic in the Second World War. And so I think it's extremely important for us to remember at this time of year those people. But it is also important, as you have suggested, that proper treatment and fair treatment and generous treatment is given not only to those who are serving, but also those who have left the armed forces, particularly those who are wounded, having left the forces.
Colonel Kemp, obviously we're remembering today and honouring today servicemen and women in all conflicts from the First and Second World War and others. We're also particularly remembering those who made the ultimate sacrifice. With that in mind, do our armed services, Army, Navy, Air Force, is it still a good career? One you'd recommend to youngsters watching this programme?
Yes, I certainly would. I spent 30 years in the Army and during that time working with all branches of the armed forces. I believe there are many differences today from my experience, which is now a long time ago, really. But nevertheless, I think and some of those differences are for the better, some for the worse. But nevertheless, the career is very similar, and I think it provides enormous challenges, enormously valuable experience. It gives people confidence. In many cases, young men and women come from very difficult family backgrounds, and for the first time ever, really, they're in the arms of a family that actually cares about them and looks after them, and wants them to succeed. And I think that's led to enormous, not only to the benefit they give to the country, but enormous benefit to themselves, almost as a social service in some cases. And I've known, for example, of a soldier I served with who became a commissioned officer. He started off as a private, the lowest rank, became quite a senior commissioned officer. And he was pretty much the only member of his family who didn't go to prison at some point or another. He made the decision to walk into a recruiting office, and his life was improved as a result. So, of course, there are some horror stories we've been hearing recently about bad experiences people have in the forces. And that's true, I think, in every walk of life. But overall, I would certainly, as somebody who's spent most of my life either in the armed forces or associated with the armed forces, I would recommend it as an extremely worthwhile career today.
And how easy or difficult is it to recruit people to serve?
Well, I think it's easy, is my view, but that kind of goes against the statistics today, where the army is undermanned, and I think the other forces are undermanned as well. And historic recruiting problems, but I believe those are not because there is a shortage of people willing to join up. I think there are plenty of people who would be and are extremely willing to join up. The reason that there is a problem with recruiting is, first of all, I think because the army and maybe the other parts of the armed forces as well don't go through the process properly. They don't really know how to recruit, and over the years they haven't really learned properly how to recruit. Recruiting is relatively easy if you go about it in the right way. And the second point is, I think that the recruitment operation has been privatised, which means that so much of it relies on online presence, which is not the all-seeing, all-solving media that many people think it is. And it also leads to soldiers who are interested in it, or to young men and women who are interested in joining the forces, not actually meeting real live soldiers until very late in the process. And that, of course, is a problem. And it's necessary in order to get rid of some of the concerns that young recruits might have by hearing from the horse's mouth what it's really all about. So, yeah, I don't think there's a problem with people willing to come forward. The problem is increased when there is a period of quiet. For example, now when there's not much going on in military terms compared to the height of the campaigns in Afghanistan, Iraq, Northern Ireland, that's the army's less in the public eye and less a kind of recruiting magnet. So I think that's a bit of a problem. But generally speaking, there isn't really a shortage of young men and women who are just as willing and determined to serve their country today as they ever have been, including the generations that we particularly commemorate today in the First and Second World War.
Colonel Richard Kemp, thanks for joining us on GB News. We appreciate your time.
We've heard from our guests so far debating whether the UK needs to do more to support veterans. We also want to know what you think.
Perhaps you're a former member of the armed services. You've got your own story. You can email in to share your views and experiences on GB News, GB Views at GB News, or tweet at GB News.
We've also started a poll on this over on the GB News Twitter page where you can add your vote via @GB News.
Up next, our reporter Mark White's in Dover, where hundreds more migrants have crossed the channel. He'll have the latest. But just before that, it's your weather forecast.
Hello. For some, it will be a fine, bright day, but generally a fairly grey affair for many. Not a lot of rain around, most places dry. Tonight it is going to turn quite windy. That's thanks to this area of low pressure that's been winding itself up overnight. Not arriving just yet, however. A couple of weak weather fronts still sitting over the UK. They are fizzling out, but leaving a lot of cloud. Some sunny spells over northeast England, northeast Scotland, and at times it'll brighten up across the south, but equally one or two light showers possible over southwest England, Wales, maybe southwest Scotland, and increasingly cloudy and windy across Northern Ireland with some rain creeping in here. But it is, again, pretty mild. Temperatures double digits for the vast majority, and where we see some brightness across the south, temperatures could get up to 15 Celsius. But here comes that low pressure system, a spell of rain crossing Northern Ireland, then spreading into Scotland and through this evening into parts of West and North Wales and Northwest England, also turning blustery with further outbreaks of rain. But for much of the south and east of England, it will stay dry. Temperatures could temporarily drop down to single figures, but for most, it will be quite a mild start to Friday because of the wind. A blustery day then. Not much rain across East Anglia and the southeast, but quite a soggy morning for Scotland, parts of northwest England, and the rain will steadily spread across much of Wales and northeast England too. Showers across the south are possible, and some showers will continue for Northern Ireland. It will be a blustery day, even though, again, temperatures on the mild side, not feeling all that mild because of the gusty winds. Further rain to come through the evening across parts of central and southern Scotland. Still a few showers elsewhere, but generally things are turning drier. The rain is likely to persist, however, across Shetland into Saturday. Into the weekend, though, things are calming down once more as things start to turn drier. The winds will ease, but most will stay fairly cloudy. Goodbye.
Join me, Alex Phillips, for the afternoon agenda on GB News, Monday to Thursday from 4 p.m. till 6 p.m. We don't lecture to you or try to tell you what to think. We do a deep delve into a topic with views from across the range of debate, therefore leaving you, the viewer, to make up your own mind. Join me, Alex Phillips, for the afternoon agenda on GB News, 4 till 6, Monday to Thursday. You're watching GB News live across the UK and the world on our digital stream.
GB News is Britain's news channel.
We are the UK's home of discussion and debate from all perspectives.
We are here for you. Don't forget to join our YouTube community by clicking on that subscribe button.
And if you want the GB News app, you can click and catch up on programmes anytime.
We love to hear from you, so email us.
gbviews@gbnews.uk.
Thanks for being part of the GB News family.
My name is Andrew Doyle. Join me every Sunday evening at 7 p.m. for Free Speech Nation. This is a show where we address current affairs and news stories of the week with the help of two wonderful comedian panellists. I brought in comics because I want to give it a lighter edge, and also they work for less. See you there.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday, and there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch. And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
I'm Colin Brazier. I've reported from more than 70 countries around the world, covered wars from Afghanistan to Iraq, from Lebanon to the Balkans. I'm trying to bring that experience, that feel for events, to the studio. And something else, I'm ready to give an opinion. Today's stories with a spark. Brazier from 8 p.m. weekdays on GB News.
Welcome back. Remember to send us your views on the debate of the day. Does the UK need to do more to support its veterans?
Get in touch with your view and even with your experience if you are an ex-service man or service woman. Email us gbviews@gbnews.uk or tweet @gbnews.
We're going to cross to our home and security editor, Mark White, now, who's in Dover, where hundreds of migrants have crossed the English Channel in the past 48 hours. Mark.
It has been a phenomenally busy day out in the Channel, and it's not over yet. There are multiple incidents that the lifeboat and Border Force vessels are attending out in the Channel. I'm just going to step to the side to let you get the very latest live images there of what you're seeing is the rear end of the Dover lifeboat, the stern of the Dover lifeboat, absolutely packed with migrants. Now, there have been, we understand, at least 25 small boat incursions into British waters during the course of this morning and into the early afternoon, but that is still continuing. Lifeboats, 4 lifeboats, maybe 5 lifeboats now involved in back-to-back calls attending incidents because, of course, the migrants who are on these small boats are instructed by the people smugglers to dial 999 and say that they're in trouble. RNLI and other rescue services can do nothing but treat that seriously and respond to it, and of course then they're guaranteed to be picked up and brought ashore, which is exactly what they want. Now, I said at least 25 boats today. We're also told that we may well now be heading for a record day. Last Wednesday was the biggest single day in terms of migrants who crossed into British waters, 853 in a single day. Well, we're being told now by sources that today may well eclipse that because of the numbers coming. We just want to show you some of the boats down here, actually. This is where initially quite a few of the rigid inflatable boats that come in are placed into storage down here before then going off to a sort of more semi-permanent storage lot not too far from here. You can see on that boat there, number 865. Well, there are even more than that. That, of course, means that 865 of these boats have come across in the past year. And you can see from the size of them as well, they are so much bigger. They're about the third of the size of that a few months back, but the people smugglers are getting more sophisticated in their smuggling operations. They're buying these 11-metre long vessels, boats I should say, and they're filling them. Well, today the boats that have been coming across have all been roughly this size as well, and there has been at least 40, 50, even 60 migrants on these individual boats coming across. So that gives you an indication with 25 boats intercepted so far. We'll give you another look over there at the Dover lifeboat of just how the numbers are very significant, but the activity that the lifeboat Border Force is involved in is very significant. Now, what is happening here at the moment, you can see the migrants who are in the stern of that Dover lifeboat. They've got the life jackets that are on them. They're just being effectively arranged by Coast Guard teams that are helping out today. That's how bad things are getting. It's not just lifeboat crews and Border Force crews, but actually the Coast Guard have had to supplement those numbers with quite a few extra officers as well to be able to deal with the very significant number of people coming here to Dover. So they are taking them, they will be bringing them towards us and up the gangway, which is just between us and the lifeboat there, where they'll be processed, and then 99% of them enter our asylum system.
Mark, I've just been looking back at some of the historic numbers. As recently as 2019, in the whole of 2019, we had 1,900 migrants entering the UK illegally via these small boats. So that's 1,900 in the whole year. We're now looking at 1,200 in just a couple of days. The numbers are really accelerating.
Yeah. I'm just being told that there's another Border Force vessel that's just in the outer harbour about to come in now, absolutely full to the gunnels with more migrants. You make a very good point there, Liam, about the way in which the numbers have just increased exponentially from just 1,000 or so a few years ago. Last year, of course, 8,400, and this year, we are now we're well over 23,000 now. We're heading towards the figure of not twice as many migrants having crossed this year as last year, but 3 times as many. Now, you can see just over to my left, that marquee there, that is a makeshift processing centre. That's where the migrants are taken. They're taken up the gangway to the left of shot, and then they're brought into this marquee. But just about 50 metres or so from here, they are building a £2 million processing centre, which is all fenced off, so the media won't be able to see what's going on in that processing centre. But it also tells you where the Home Office is at here. They are fully expecting that this migrant crisis is not going to be resolved anytime soon, that the numbers that we're seeing continuing to arrive here is only probably going to grow in the weeks and months ahead.
Mark White, superb reporting there from Dover. Our Home Affairs and Security Editor, Mark White.
Right, after this break, it's all about your opinion. Join the debate next under Piero and Halligan. But first, the news headlines with Rosie.
I'm Rosie Wright. Let's get you up to date. The Duchess of Cornwall has joined millions of people observing 2 minutes silence for Armistice Day. On the 11th hour of the 11th day on the 11th month, people across the UK paused to honour those who made the ultimate sacrifice. Border Force officials have intercepted at least 25 migrant boats attempting to cross the Channel today. Up to 50 people were on board each vessel. It's been reported that 4 small boats have also made it to shore, landing on beaches in Deal in Kent. A funeral's been held for Northern Ireland veteran Dennis Hutchings. Hundreds of mourners lined a road in Plymouth, applauding, cheering and saluting as the coffin arrived at the church, escorted by bikers. The 80-year-old died from COVID last month. He was awaiting a trial over a shooting in County Tyrone during the Troubles in 1974. NHS waiting lists in England have reached record levels as health leaders warn the system is buckling under pressure. Data from NHS England shows 5.8 million people were on waiting lists at the end of September, the highest number since records began. 11 UK retailers are recalling batches of cold and flu capsules because of a mistake on the packaging. Perrigo tablets overstated the safe maximum daily dose for children. The medicines regulator says the risk to consumers is low. Steven Gerrard says Aston Villa's ambitious plans influence his decision to become the club's new head coach. Gerrard replaces Dean Smith, who was sacked by Villa on Sunday. You are up to date. I'll have a full update for you at 3 o'clock.
You're watching GB News live across the UK and the world on our digital stream.
GB News is Britain's news channel.
We are the UK's home of discussion and debate from all perspectives.
We are here for you. Don't forget to join our YouTube community by clicking on that subscribe button.
And if you want the GB News app, you can click and catch up on programmes anytime.
We love to hear from you, so email us.
gbviews@gbnews.uk.
Thanks for being part of the GB News family.
My name is Andrew Doyle. Join me every Sunday evening at 7 p.m. for Free Speech Nation. This is a show where we address current affairs and news stories of the week with the help of 2 wonderful comedian panellists. I brought in comics because I want to give it a lighter edge, and also they work for less. See you there.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday, and there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch. And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
I'm Colin Brazier. I've reported from more than 70 countries around the world, covered wars from Afghanistan to Iraq, from Lebanon to the Balkans. I'm trying to bring that experience, that feel for events, to the studio. And something else, I'm ready to give an opinion. Today's stories with a spark. Brazier from 8 p.m. weekdays on GB News.
Welcome back. We're continuing with our debate. Does the UK need to do more to support its veterans?
We're discussing this, of course, because we're remarking Remembrance Day, when millions of people across Britain observe a 2-minute silence in honour of those who lost their lives in 2 world wars and other conflicts.
Joining us now on the show is psychotherapist Emma Kenny, who has experience of supporting former members of the armed forces with their mental health. Hi, Emma. Tell us about the common themes that emerge in your work.
I mean, there are lots of different themes, but PTSD is obviously one of the ones that we talk about in the press because it's kind of very, very severe, and a lot of veterans, particularly those who've actually been in war zones, experience it. So about 6% of individuals who've been in areas that are war-torn will go through it. But it's not just that. So alcoholism is far higher. Also, when you think about homelessness, there's 6,000 veterans on the streets, there's 3,000 in our prisons. So these are things that come from the experiences often that they've gone through when they've been in service, and also what they've experienced coming out of service, because the reality is that there is a disciplined experience of being in the forces. And when you come out, the world can feel like a very foundationless place. Add to that the fact that one of the big changes that we've seen in the past 50 years is attitudes towards people in the forces declining. So these people who risk their lives for us and are willing to be absolutely courageous for king and country and queen and country don't necessarily get the responses of the public that they deserve. Because whether we agree or disagree with the forces being in situations and circumstances where they're placed, the point is they're willing to do that to protect us. So it's a whole merging of these themes that leads to these individuals often feeling like they haven't got the support, which is why when you look at PTSD, this can be something they experience 6 months after a horrible incident, or it can be very complex and they might not develop it for 5-6 years, meaning that they might be out of the services and not even aware of what's going on for them by the time that they start exploring those issues that they're going through.
Emma, this isn't a day to criticise our armed forces, far from it, but it is above all a day to honour our veterans and to listen to them. To what extent has it been a theme among people that you've helped to counsel, ex-service men and women, that their regiments, the branch of the armed services they work for, haven't supported them enough? And is there a danger that we can over-rely on the excellent charities like the British Legion and others that do so much to support our veterans?
There are incredible charities out there, but 74% of those charities say that the government is not doing enough. And actually, with respect, the MOD isn't doing enough to protect individuals who develop these kind of mental health issues. Mental health issues are also higher again in individuals who've been in situations where they've been in the forces and been in war-torn areas. So we can kind of see statistically that the support isn't necessarily as acute as it should be from the areas that it should be coming from. And actually, charities who are unbelievably effective at trying to meet the needs in so many different ways of veterans who fall foul of those circumstances and don't have the support that they should be given. They have to pick it up, but they don't feel that it's enough. And if you come into private therapy, for example, or voluntary therapy, often it's because you haven't received the support. You know, you would expect that there's a package. So that if you come out of the forces, no matter how long it takes, even for the lifetime that you live, you can always go back and call on therapeutic paradigms and support services and rehabilitation rehabilitation in lots of different ways, whether that's from alcohol misuse or drug misuse. These should be built in really to the primary experience of an individual committing to the forces. And as you said, the reality is that these people who go in, these men and women who go into the forces, they're literally willing to die for you. So we should, without a doubt, subsequently provide elements so that they can engage at any point that is required in the future to feel that they've got the support that they deserve, firstly, that they need, secondly, and that we should provide, because when you explore their willingness to sacrifice for us, as we have seen, and some people aren't alive today because they sacrifice themselves that way, therefore, that's an incredible, incredible amount of courage, and we deserve to offer them the kind of support that will meet that courage when they're in pain, when they're in problems. So I think charities all agree, and certainly the research definitely supports. The research says that charities feel that the government isn't doing enough, and neither is the MOD.
It must be hard for their families often too. What sort of support do they need which they feel is lacking?
You know, I heard some really good quotes from family members of veterans, one of which was really powerful when he came back and he had really dreadful PTSD. And it was meaning that he was violent. And that was not his nature prior to going in to the services and prior to experiencing these war-torn countries. And what she said was that it surprises her more when people don't come back with that level of trauma, because that's kind of something that you expect to change you. So when families delivered back their loved ones, often it can be that those loved ones have completely transformed. Now, it doesn't have to be permanent. It's a temporary transformation as long as support is given. But if it's not, you're looking at so many problems. So self-medication, most of us look for things that can soothe our situations. And sometimes we make some really bad choices, like drugs, like alcohol, like turning to crime. There are things that people do that are highly destructive because they don't know how to manage their pain. So essentially, the families get this, and then they have to either support them, which has an impact, understandably, on the whole dynamic, or they reject them, which then leads to horrific situations such as homelessness. So again, family support and family dynamic and therapy work should be offered, because families are, as you know, they're victims of these kind of circumstances. And I think the fact that we can have this conversation, and I can quote figures where we've got so many veterans on the streets and in prison, we know that we're clearly not meeting their needs because they wouldn't be there. And the fall from grace in that context, from, you know, king and country, queen and country, to being in Her Majesty's prisons, that says there's a huge problem with the bridge that we need to the gap we need to bridge to ensure that people don't fall foul of this situation. Yeah, definitely.
Emma Kenny, psychotherapist, great to have you on the show as ever. Thanks for your time.
Thanks for having me.
Joining us now on the show is the CEO at Walking with the Wounded, Fergus Williams. Fergus, tell us about your organisation.
Gloria, good afternoon. Liam, hi. So Walking the Wounded, we only started about 10 years ago, and we are out a national charity supporting veterans. I would say that we probably support veterans at the lowest needs level, or the highest needs level, in that they're quite vulnerable. And we support with mental health, with employability, volunteering, and care coordination.
To what extent, just following on from what Emma Kenny was saying there, Fergus, we're not here to diss the armed services at all. On the contrary, we're honouring our armed services today above all days. But do you think that the armed services do enough for veterans? We rely heavily on charities like the British Legion, on charities like yours.
Do you know what? Emma made a really important point. You know, the need. I mean, there is clearly, are we addressing the need? And there are homeless guys out there. There are veterans that are seeking and not receiving mental health care that they need. And I would suggest no. Of course, the government and the MOD need to do more. To be fair, over the last 10 years, they have, particularly the NHS, really upped their game. You know, in 2010, the NHS was spending a little over £1 million on veteran mental health. This year, I believe the figure is more like 16.5. So they are trying, but there is more to do. The need is absolutely out there. Last year, during COVID, we supported nearly 3,000 veterans. I believe this year we're going to support more like 3,500 veterans. So veterans are still coming forward with issues, and actually the state isn't able to address those needs, and hence the need for charities like ours.
Biggest issues or needs that veterans demand?
I say mental health. I mean, for us, 70% of our client base is mental health. That trauma. Now, we have to be clear. Emma talks about PTSD. Yes, PTSD is a big issue for those that have served, but there are also common or garden mental health issues that we all suffer from. Now, whether that is anxiety or depression, I think the stats are 1 in 4 of us will have a poor mental health episode during our life. But the fact that they served, they stood up and said, yes, I will serve my country, I think they do deserve. And in and amongst those are those that have been affected by trauma, by combat. And absolutely, those guys need gold-plated service.
This is a day, Fergus, when we're all encouraged to put a few coins in to make donations to charities like yours. Just briefly, before we move on to our next guest, what would you say to the general public as you and other charities look to raise funds?
Well, funding is our lifeblood, and everybody here is wearing their poppy, and that's a brilliant initiative. For us, we're doing a big walking home for Christmas this Christmas to ensure that no veteran is left behind. But the charities do a very good job, and not only that, actually they collaborate extremely well. We have tiered services interoperable between the different charities. So somebody comes in here and I go, no, I'm not terribly strong in that area, I will pass them on to the Legion or other charities that excel in those particular geographies and those areas. But for me, I think those smaller charities that are out there, they will have really struggled over the last 2 years with the pandemic, and I think they are vital because they're picking up veterans off the street. Social isolation is a big issue, and veterans actually putting their hands up, and for charities to find them, it's the local charities out there that are finding them and then passing them on to the bigger charities out there that have the good services.
Fergus Williams, CEO of Walking with the Wounded. Once again, thanks to you for your work with our revered veterans.
We're delighted now to be joined by Dame Vera Lynn's daughter, Virginia Lewis Jones. Dame Vera, who was known as the Forces sweetheart, whose songs helped raise morale in World War II, sadly no longer with us. Virginia, a delight to have you with us. You do a lot of fundraising, don't you, for our veterans? Just tell us how and why.
Well, it's extremely important, and I couldn't agree more with everything that's just gone before. And to be perfectly frank, no government, no matter who they are, has done enough for them. They fought for our country. They've been injured, wounded mentally or physically, and the government, I hate to say it, but they don't. It doesn't matter what government it is, under what colour. Nobody has done enough. There should be something in place like we used to have with council houses, where properties in various parts of the country are in fact either built or taken over so that veterans can at least have somewhere to live. And there should be something, I feel, that's linked to those properties with access to mental health people, physical people, whatever. So it's almost like a little community, and I don't think that's being done under any circumstances at the moment. The charities are wonderful. They're all doing their best, especially under the present situation and financial situation. I mean, I've collaborated, as you know, with the Royal British Legion. They designed some wonderful jewellery to commemorate Mummy, and all those funds will be going to help the veterans. Doesn't matter what age they are, whether they're 23 and just come out from Afghanistan or wherever, or whether they're 75 and from the world wars. It doesn't matter. What is very important is that we need housing specifically for veterans so that they are not ending up on the street, and that there is some help associated with those properties that can aid them, as I say, with either mental or physical disabilities.
Virginia, your late mother, of course, was such a incredible symbol of national cohesion at a time of national stress and despair. Last time I spoke to you was the day that Sir David Amess was tragically attacked in his constituency. Sir David, of course, sadly died, but he did do an awful lot of work with you to try and get that memorial for your mother up and running. Can you give us an update on that? Because for me, that statue, that memorial, isn't just a tribute to your mum. It's also a tribute to that time and, in turn, our armed forces and veterans in general.
Absolutely. Well, Paul Day hopefully is doing it, and it will include a tribute to David because he was the one that started all this, really, the memorial, and he was the one that, as I've said before, is what I call a benign bully and bullied people into it. But the government are behind it, and we're still desperate. I mean, 1.5 million is an awful lot of money to raise. I think what people don't understand is that you can't just get a 30-ton bronze and say, oh, I think we'll put it over there. You've got to find out if the infrastructure is right, and there's a lot involved, and the sculptor does not get anything near that amount of money. So we are desperate for money for that, and it will include, okay, there's apart from Mummy singing, I mean, if you go to the website, which is the Dame Vera Lynn Memorial Statue.co.uk, you'll see what is in place and what we're attempting to do. And it includes not only older veterans, younger veterans, when she was on tour, the disabled children that she's raised millions for, let's face it, as well as veterans over the years. And it's an extremely, extremely important memorial. I mean, obviously I'm biased because she's my mother, but I think for everybody to realise, and she was also in the forefront of the women's lib, if you like. I mean, what anybody else in those days went to Burma for 3 months in the middle of the jungle to sing. They didn't, you know. In fact, Enso only went so far and said, oh, no, we can't do this. They have to give it to the army. So it was the army that looked after Mummy. And she was, if you like, a guiding light for women's lib, for this is what you can do, girls, get on with it and do it. And that remains the same today. I think it's very, very important that we honour the veterans, young and old, and there's a lot of very young veterans. And as I say, what I would like to see is something in the way of buildings, or just reiterating what I was saying before, really, that encompasses their needs. And it will cost money, yes, but, you know, hey, if it wasn't for them, we wouldn't even be here, especially after World War II, when, you know, people were being killed and shot because they weren't of a particular ethnic persuasion. Yes, thank you, is my husband. And he's absolutely right. You know, none of us would probably be here, because I come from a mixed background, which was great. And I think we have to say thank you to those people, both in Second World War
we
and
certainly
today.
do have to say thank you. Virginia Lewis-Jones, fantastic stuff. We could talk to you all day, daughter of Vera Lynn. Thanks for your time, but we do want to come on to some emails. It's your views now.
So let's get straight to those emails. As Rail says, our veterans deserve our respect and support much more than they are being given so far by our political elite.
Wolf says we definitely should be providing them more support. No veteran should be seen begging or sleeping on the street.
Elizabeth says it's a shame that support for veterans mostly falls to charitable organisations. Perhaps government could take a more active role there.
Don emailed us. It's right and important we remember the fallen soldiers, but let's not forget the living soldiers too.
And Tracy says they were prepared to give their life for their country. We should give them whatever they need.
You've been voting in our Twitter poll. 96% of you said yes, the UK does need to do more to support our veterans. Thanks for watching us.
Thank you.
Hello. For some, it will be a fine, bright day, but generally a fairly grey affair for many.